about 5 years ago, if not more, in Victoria, we released the Better Apartment Design, which has been for absolute benefit. But before that, literally you could do whatever you want. You could develop whatever you want. You could build whatever you want. The market was so hot that anything would sell. So that was great for making commission, but really what it did was create some really poor quality product.
You're listening to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard. Here's your host, Tabitha Bright.
Hello and welcome to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard, where I get to speak to property investors from around Australia about their investing journey. My name is Tabitha Bright and I'm the head of advising here at Positive Real Estate, where we help people build wealth through property. With over 8,000 clients across Australia and New Zealand, there are some incredible stories to tell, which hopefully make your investing journey that little bit easier and will inspire you along the way. My guest today is Stefanie Palazzolo, part of our team here at Positive Real Estate. And she and I discuss doing due diligence on developers so you know your product, super important, how to safely buy off the plan, and why body corporate is actually a really important vehicle to add value to your asset. So enjoy this conversation with Stef and I. Hey folks, Tabitha here, head of the advising team for Positive Real Estate, what some of you guys would know as the coaches here at Positive Real Estate. And I'm super lucky to have with me today Stefanie, and she is relatively new to our team. She is heading up what some of you may know as the property consultants, which we now call the property strategists. So welcome, Stef, to Positive Real Estate and to the podcast today. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Tab. Yeah, awesome to be here. I'm super excited to be involved in the podcast world. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. And my purpose for having Stef here today is one, to introduce her, I beg your pardon, as part of our 6-star team. So the property consultants / property strategists are an integral part of our team. So they work with our coaches, our advisors, to find property, to match property that fits our clients' strategies. And Stef heads up this team. Now, Stef has done, I'm just looking at my notes here because I've had a good chat to Stef. I've got a heap of notes. Stef originally started with Colliers International, who are a commercial real estate agency. For those of you that don't know, agency is probably not doing them justice, company, and international obviously being key there. And she did 4 years with them and then a further 11 years with CBRE. And Stef, tell me a little bit about your career, because your experience is very broad and we're super lucky to have you here at Positive Real Estate. So tell me a little bit about you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'll say the 2.5 months that I've been here has been awesome. So I'm very, very excited to be a part of this team. My career is quite niche. I started, about 15 years ago at Colliers in residential project marketing. So basically what that means is off the plan developments.
Oh, yeah.
And that's basically where I stayed for the last 15 years until 2.5 years ago. 2.5 months ago. So my experience has always been firsthand with developers. So people who are buying sites and, developing 100 apartments or 1,000 apartments.
Wow.
That's always been where I've been in that space.
Yeah.
And my skill set, or I guess my experience in those two companies, I started fresh out of uni. So I started in sales administration, in contract administration, moved through into operations, growing the team, learning about the P&L, financing, invoicing, that sort of stuff. Then sort of moved into channel management, which is basically managing companies like a Positive and working really closely with Positive on helping deliver a sales result for a developer. So that's sort of that side of things. Also did sales management, managing the sales team, and along the way worked really closely with the marketing team. So my skill set is quite broad, but also from a very specific background of residential project marketing here in Melbourne.
Right. And so the benefit for us and for our clients is Stef has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to working on quality residential real estate that is off the plan. And sometimes we have these preconceived ideas around off the plan and around apartment buying. A big part of my portfolio are apartments. And there is often a belief that apartments don't get capital growth, or you've got to deal with body corporates. And there's two things I want to address there before I hand back to Stef for some commentary. First of all, apartments do get capital growth. Like all property, the capital growth is delivered at the time that the market feels like delivering it. And it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the house market cycle. So just because houses go up doesn't mean that apartments go up. Sometimes they have their own cycle based on their own supply and demand. The other thing is that what helps capital growth with apartments is quality development. And there is a massive breadth of the types of apartments that come up for sale as off the plan. And Stef, you would have seen developers of all levels. You would have seen, I imagine, you would have seen the, if I can be so frank, probably the ugly side of development, and all the way through to really good quality stuff like you and I met. Was it on Hyatt that you and I met?
Yeah.
I knew it was. We had two developments out in that area, and Hyatt was one of them, which is an example of an amazing master plan in a unique spot in the Melbourne market. So tell us a little bit about how developers work and what your experience has been with them, because you were talking about understanding developers and what to look for with developers. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so look, I'll speak probably more specifically about the Melbourne market, but it has changed a lot in the last sort of 10, 15 years. And when I started in the industry, it was really in this boom time. About 5 years ago, if not more, in Victoria, we released the Better Apartment Design, which has been for absolute benefit. But before that, literally, you could do whatever you want. You could develop whatever you want. You could build whatever you want. The market was so hot that anything would sell. So that was great for making commission, but really what it did was create some really poor quality product. And what I've learned or I've seen throughout the process is the market, so the buyers have become a lot more astute, knowing what they want, what works well, what sells well, what rents well. And as a result, developers have had to raise the bar of the quality of projects they're delivering. And it doesn't just come to the quality of the property itself. It comes to the quality of the team that they have, who their architect is, who their landscape architect is, when it comes to settlement, who's actually managing, all of these people living in these buildings. So they've had to really refine their process, because what happened is developers that didn't really care so much about that really lost on their brand and lost their credibility, and created this image of, oh, that's a such and such development, I know that's going to be crappy, or vice versa. So we've got some, we work with some incredible developers that have built a really good name from them through this tumultuous environment. And we know that the result that they're going to deliver, because that's what they delivered in the last one and the last one and the last one. So I would say that has been a really big shift over the last kind of 15 years for the good. Unfortunately, it does mean there's less stuff out there. And obviously we're in an incredible crisis of supply, and that there's a whole range of reasons as to why. But increased quality and increased standards has played a part in that, and I think for the better. So
and it's interesting too, because we've seen a massive shift as well with downsizers that everyone talks about too. And downsizers, my age, my demographic, I'm 55. For those of you that don't know, sometimes it's hard to tell on Zoom. We've got nice lighting and bits and pieces. You can't see as many of my wrinkles. What was I going to say? I distracted myself. Oh, with downsizers, we're looking for very specific features for quality of lifestyle, for house style living in apartments, which has forced a lot of developers to really change what they're building, as well as what I've seen in inner city. And then if we're talking about what makes and I'll say loosely, bad apartment, there's a number of things that come to mind for me when I coach clients on what I would avoid if I was buying an apartment, because I'll put my hand up and say, I have bought a 1-bedroom apartment in the South Brisbane market at the height of an oversupplied market. Now, people would say to me, why on earth would you do that? Because that sounds like a really bad idea. But I bought a brand developer, Aria, who are very well known for delivering exceptional stock and exceptional projects. It was larger than your standard 1-bedroom, and 1-bedrooms in Melbourne, they were getting down to like 30. I mean, you can't even call them 1-bedroom, can you? They were like 29 square meters. Like, so I bought a 1-bedroom apartment that could pretty much be a 2-bedroom apartment in size. The layout and floor plan of that 1-bedroom apartment and its outdoor living space made it a superior purchase, and it has had fantastic capital growth. On top of that, I've had like 1 week vacant. There is always a queue in this particular building for rental, because it is such a well-planned, well laid out, well amenitized, if there's such a word, development by a very well-known developer. We have people that follow this particular developer to buy their stock, which is this thing we're seeing happening now in Melbourne. And there was one other point I was going to make on that. Oh, and I have seen regular rent increases above market rate, despite at the time there being an oversupply, which is now corrected, and now there's an undersupply. So these things are always short term. So when we're buying apartments, I use that property as an example, because we have to put aside our preconceived ideas sometimes around what is a good investment and whether we're due off the plan and apartment buying. Because we have this idea that, particularly in Melbourne, because I'm a Melbourneite, that apartments don't get capital growth and that they're essentially a bad investment. And a lot of this lags back to what Steph was just saying around what was allowed for development and what is now not allowed. And we're seeing this quality stock come through. Steph, you also referred to how important it is, the after sales delivery of how the property is rented, how it's maintained, that affects its capital growth. We were talking about cigarette butts on the street. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because developers are now investing in this, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a bit of context, we're talking here about when a development is complete and the tenants are moving in or the residents are moving in, because a developer's brand carries through the entire life cycle, right up until 10, 20 years down the track, and we discover there's flammable cladding, like issues come up all the time. So a good developer and a seasoned developer will maintain that process well the entire way. It's not just selling at the front, it's at the process of when people actually move in. And, I kind of like to think of like the broken window theory. If you let one broken window go, it kind of gives a message out to the public that you're allowed to have lots of broken windows. So, if you're in a development where it's not well managed and people are allowed to, leave cigarette butts on the floor or not pick up after their pets, it sends a message to the residents. It sends a message to people prospecting to live in that building or in that development that it's okay to not actually care. And it also tells a message that the developer doesn't care, that the owner's corporation doesn't care. It flows on to all of the different people involved.
Yeah.
And so I guess a theme of some of the things you and I were talking about, Tab, before we started was getting that team right and knowing who that team is. So when you do settle, who is your property manager? Who is the building manager? Who's the owner's corporation or strata management if you're in other states? All of those things are important to understand. Have they got, a really cool system, an app that you can, book rooms out and you can know who else has been in the room, and there's accountability for when someone uses a private dining room and, who's left the mess behind. We know who's been in that space. All of those things add to the quality of the development. They add to what you were talking about, the capital growth and the great rental returns.
Absolutely.
And just to touch on, what you were talking about before is what makes a good apartment is just not the apartment itself. It's around how it's delivered, how it's maintained.
Yeah.
I sort of think of, like Sam's Forex growth plan when he talks about that emotional factor.
Yeah.
There's sometimes you can't draw on a piece of paper what is a good property. It sometimes it is, the beautiful north aspect, or the fact that when you arrive at development, it's just immensely immaculate. These are things that you don't necessarily quantify when you're buying, but it is something that a tenant or that a resident will put a lot of value in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just say the team that you're dealing with the entire process is super important.
Yeah. And it's why it's a lesson that we learned fairly early on about delivering quality stock and working with quality brand developers is so important. And there was a point I was going to make before and I had it all banked up and now it's gone. Whew. But I think it was relating it back to the capital growth. So all of that stuff, remembered, all of that stuff relates back to capital growth. And I was having a chat with my mum, and she'll be mortified that I've mentioned. She said, "Don't you ever mention me on one of your podcasts." I said, "Mum, I'll interview you," because she's like your parents, Steph, is a mad investor, but they love to renovate, and they're in their 70s and they're still bloody renovating. Can you believe it? And she said to me, I don't understand apartments. She said, you've got to deal with these body corporations. And I was like, well, yes, you do. But think about, as an investor, and it's something to consider if you're a busy investor. So if you have your life and you've got a high-powered career, you've got kids you got to run around to sport, you've got a busy life and you don't like admin, and you tend to be concerned about cash flow and stuff. This is why I often like apartments for people, because I fall into that. I'm busy. I don't have time for a lot of life admin. And apartments, having a body corporate, they look after so much of the external of your apartment. And yes, you might pay 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a year for that privilege of having it cleaned, it swept, the amenities kept up, and all of that stuff, the insurance is kept up. But often when we're left to our own devices, particularly with houses, how often do you do maintenance? Do you do 2, 3, 4 grand's worth of maintenance on your property every year externally when you own a house that you invest in? And a lot of people don't. They let the fences rot, they let the grass grow, they let the roof go, tiles fall off. And then all of a sudden, in 10 years, I hit with a 20, 30 grand bill to have to fix up and do repairs on. And so body corporate is a way of maintaining our property and preserving its capital growth when it's run well. And I just wanted to highlight that, because that's often something that people get caught up about apartment buying. And an example of this, Steph, I'm going to call on your special story. I always like... It's really interesting, because when we have professionals that have been in the real estate industry for a long time, we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with, people from all walks of life often. And this is an example. Steph, I'll let you tell the story and we'll loop back into the lessons in this. So go.
It's just it's a funny one. It's probably not very PG rated, but
totally fine.
We had an example of a beautiful development that sold well, built well, settled well, but maybe a bit of greenness from this particular developer with who they were using as their owner's corporation manager to start with.
Right.
And we had some complaints come through from tenants. We had, obviously, we sold to owner occupiers as well. So we had residents living there complaining that their communal spaces, the pool, the private dining and so forth, was, being used as like there were cameras and things in there at weird times, people like posing and using the space really weirdly. Nothing, they weren't really doing anything wrong, but it was disrupting people. People thought it was a bit strange. They felt unusual that people were filming. And we did some investigation and found out that in the end, it was actually a porn production company using the beautiful amenity as like a backdrop for, I guess, doing whatever they do. So that was kind of a funny one. And look, actually, they maintained the space well. There was no issue, but it was good to know that with a good owners corporation, we could identify who the people were. We had a tracking system. We were able to say, look, technically you're not really doing anything wrong, but residents don't feel comfortable with cameras in their communal spaces, and take that into your own
Porn
space.
stars floating around.
Exactly. But that was a funny one. But look, there's lots of examples of it being managed really poorly. Like, I think we were talking about this before, like people having parties and not cleaning up after themselves. And then there's scratches on the wall and wine stains on the carpet. When it's maintained properly and when there's accountability and there's a system involved with the residents using the spaces, everyone has respect, and it's reflected throughout the quality of the building. You can see it the moment you step into a development.
Yeah.
I use cigarette butts as a good measure because it's something that's easily done, but it adds up, and it really does pull down, the look of a building. So yeah, having the right team and having your developer picking the right team, picking the right developer who's then going to pick the right team is going to be really important. It's a snowball effect there for sure.
Yeah. And at the risk of repeating myself, and poor Steph has to listen to this story twice, I may have mentioned it on a podcast before, but this is another example of where the body corporate is so important, but also having great amenities for a building also kind of protects you as a landlord, because I had an apartment that I had let to a young man who kept it so pristine. It looked like a showroom. And every time I got my report from the agent, it was like, is he even living there? And I thought, oh, is he bloody Airbnb-ing it or something as a secondary thing? He's got a lease and he's releasing it out. I couldn't find it on Airbnb. And I thought, okay, he pays the rent on time. He's super clean. He's just that guy. And then I got a call from the property manager, who was actually the property management agency run by the developer in this case. So often developers will have their own PM team. And this property manager said, listen, we're going to have to kick your very good tenant out, because last weekend he had a party in the communal dining area, and there were some drugs. So this is definitely not a PG episode. We'll put a warning on this so you don't listen to it with your kids in the car. There were some drugs involved. There was lots of alcohol involved, and a lot of residents complained because it was when families were trying to have barbecues. And when we got security up to ask them to leave, he said they locked the door, so the security guards couldn't get in, and continued to party until the police could eventually turn up and make sure that they evacuated the space. And part of me just went, well, thank God for the communal space, because A, I pay for it in my body corp, B, it's part of all of my insurances, and C, he didn't do it in my property. And so my property remained totally pristine. And while there was certainly some disruption, it was sorted immediately by the property manager, who had it in their best interest to protect the brand of the developer. And it sorted it out for the tenants quick smart as well. So, once again, an example of how important it is. And with your porn story, I will go back. They weren't actually performing porn.
No.
It was just like
it was like the intro part.
The intro. So I'm the secretary and you're the doctor, and we're having that conversation in the beautiful surroundings. Right. Okay. We don't need to go into it any more than that. But
and look, I think the point of those two stories is that at the end of the day, you can't control people, right? There's lots of wild and wacky people out there that are going to do their own thing.
Yeah.
But what you do have control over, or at least foresight over, is who your team are. You can control who your property manager is. You can have a say in the owners corporation at the AGMs. You can contribute to that, and that's something you can control. And the rest, you just got to rely on the system and the process and hope that it works out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And further to that, chiming in on the theme of this podcast: quality developer, quality product, quality team. And that will be not only the team that the developer has around them, but your team that you have personally to help build your business, which is your investing, because your investing is your business. And that's why we're so proud of our 6-star team here at Positive Real Estate. So both Stef and I are part of that 6-star team. My little point on the star is the coaches and advisors. Stef's point on the star is the property consultants, if I can get that out, / strategists that work together to get you guys fantastic results. And then, of course, we have the PM team, the accounting team and tax people. We have financial planners. We have contracts team. We can go on and on and on, joint ventures, the work. So having that team around you is super, super important. Is there anything that you think that I've forgotten, Stef, that you want to mention that I haven't asked you yet? Otherwise, I'll get to my normal end of the podcast question.
I just wanted to just share when we're talking about the 6-star team, because I'm new, so I'm new to the business, so I'm getting to learn all the ins and outs of the company. And one thing I will say is that our team of strategists / the old terminology PCs, we have an incredibly diverse team of licensed real estate agents that have come from lots of different backgrounds. And obviously you've got your 6-star team, but within your teams you've got such a wealth of knowledge, a breadth of knowledge of all different industry types, market types, even just own personal backgrounds. And I think that's the amazing thing about all of the teams within Positive is there's going to be someone that can help you with a question that you have, no matter what it is.
That's true.
And if that one particular person that you're dealing with can't, we will find the person that can. I think that's just been such an amazing part of this journey for me, being part of Positive, is there's someone for everything in this company, which is really, really awesome.
Oh, that's cool to hear. And it's a good reminder because, there are somewhere between, we're international. We have our fabulous Manila team. We have our New Zealand team. We have a coach that coaches all the way from the UK who is an Aussie, but she's over in the UK at the moment. And of course, we have the wide breadth of the New Zealand team. We even have team in South America. I think Candy, one of our graphic designers, is over that way. So, and forgive me if there's anyone I've left out. So, there's 160 of us spread around the globe with experience from everything from personally investing to your legal team to you name it. I think we've pretty much, I think Jason says, that I don't think there's a question that Positive Real Estate can't answer. And I always say I might not know the answer, but I will find somebody who does, because within our team, we have that capacity, which is awesome. So Stef, to my final question for you, my friend, if you could go back in time, back to young Stef when she was just starting her career, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give young Stef?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And just keeping it on topic about, property investing, I was fortunate that I was able to make my first purchase relatively young, not that young, but sort of in my early 20s. I was in the industry. I thought I knew a lot. I didn't think I knew it all, but I thought I knew a lot given my experience. I had colleagues in the industry that gave great advice, and family that gave some unsolicited advice. But one thing I will say, and it sounds super cliche, it sounds like we're doing an ad, but I promise we're not, is 15 years on, I wish I had the right expert team, because like Sam and Jason both say it, like, don't take property advice from someone who is a poor property investor or who is investing in shares. Like, they're not going to be able to give you the right advice. So I wish I had access to this company 15 years ago, but that's okay. It's never too late to invest. I think that's also the takeaway is, I'm still in my 30s. I got plenty of time. But yeah, that's something I would say to a younger Stef and to anyone starting out is get the right team around you. And I think the other thing I would say is just get in there. Like, I think there's this quote, I don't know who said it, but the best time to have bought property was 20 years ago. And the second best time to buy property is today. So if you missed the boat 20 years ago, that's okay. You've still got today. Like, the worst thing you can do is, I guess, Obviously, you need to be financially ready.
Yeah.
But the worst thing you can do is wait, because your property is only going to go up. So
you can't time it.
you can't time it. You just, if it's right for you at the time, you've just got to do it. And yes, there's going to be ebbs and flows in a market, but if you go by what we say, which is, buy well, don't sell, what Jason says, hold something for 2 cycles, there will be growth. So just get in there and get the right team around you would be my 2 things. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I think my grandfather said a similar thing to my mother, which was what started her investing. He said to her, there's never a perfect time. You just, when you can, you do. And I think that ties in beautifully with the theme for today. So thank you, Steph. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to twist your arm. I took advantage of you being relatively new to come and let me interview you today. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Tab.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to Property Investor Tales. Remember to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode drops. As you can guess, I love hearing people's property investor tales. So if you'd like to share yours, then please get in touch with me via email at propertyinvestortales@positivementor.com.au. We would also love your feedback, and I would appreciate a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, you can watch all of these podcasts over on YouTube at Positive Mentor or at positivementor.com.au. Until then, take care, happy investing, and bye for now.